So I'm super excited, but I kind of wanted to start with a story here. There was a story that I read a lot when I was a kid. You may recognize it, maybe not. But it's about a little girl who went to her dad and she said, "Dad, I really want to play with the moon. It's so much fun." And, you know, if you have a daughter or you're, had a dad, a lot of dads try and do things for their daughter. So her father went and he got a big ladder and he took it up to the tallest mountain and he climbed all the way up to the moon and he got to the moon and he said, "Whoa, this moon is big, I can't carry it down." And he said to the moon, "Moon, you're too big, but my daughter really wants to play with you." And the moon said, "Just wait, because every day I'll get a little bit smaller and eventually you'll be able to carry me down." And indeed, that is what happened. He waited patiently and he was able to take the moon to his daughter. And she played with the moon, and she was really happy with it until one day it disappeared because it had gotten smaller and smaller and smaller. And then the next day it reappeared in the sky, and you can only imagine what she said. So, has anybody heard of this story? No? So, I kind of think of it as something that is really similar to what I do in my business. I am, along with my husband Chris, I own Road Warrior Creative. We are a digital marketing agency based out of Colorado. We do everything from social media to search engine optimization to website design and development, which does include a fair bit of e-commerce sites. And in my role, I often feel a lot like that dad, where I have clients that are saying to me, "This is this thing I want, this great big thing, can you give it to me?" And then when we do it, right, there's always something else, there's something next that's happening. So that's what this talk is about. Let's see if I can get in there. How I try to figure out how to give my clients what they want, if what they want is the right thing, or if they really know what they want. Maybe if this click works. So, how to give clients the moon. And what I want to start with is there's two basic rules that you really need to be aware of sort of first, or maybe two parts of one rule. And the first one is you have to know what you're capable of. So before you can go out and do some really awesome thing or some really complex development, you have to know if you can do that, right? And then within that, you also have to know what you're willing to do, because there may be things that you are capable of doing, but you might not actually want to do it because it's not fun or it's boring or you're like, I did that a long time ago. Or you may be capable of doing it, but the budget isn't right, so you're not willing to do it, right? So you have to sort of know those things. So what does that look like? If you are saying, I want to deliver XYZ to my client, and it's going to be really awesome, right? You want it to look like this. You want it to look like, I did this magical thing, I handed it to you, everything is fabulous. But if you don't know your capabilities ahead of time, and you haven't planned out, and you didn't scope it, then you might end up being in this scenario, where you promised that thing, and now you feel a little bit like a zombie, like trying to get that thing that you realize you actually can't get, right? So we're going to talk about what that looks like. I do want to point out, this is a breakout session. So there are going to be some moments when I ask you guys for feedback, and I'm hoping that you'll kind of chime in. Also, if there are any questions that you have along the way, please feel free to, put your hand up or shout them out at me or whatever, and we can kind of play as we go. So it should be kind of fun, hopefully. So we're going to go back to that number one rule that I talked about, which is knowing what you're capable of and knowing what you're willing to do. And for us, what that meant is that we really have to assign this and create a baseline of these things before we even really start talking to clients about projects. So we have to ask ourselves a lot of questions in order to assess that. Does anybody have any ideas? If you were trying to figure this out for yourself, what's a question that you would ask yourself? Or a question you'd ask somebody else if you were helping them figure this out? Any ideas?
What technology are you going to use?
Okay, yep, what technology are you willing to use? Anything else? What's your business objective? How much are you willing to spend? Yep. What's your timeline? How much money is it going to make you? Yep.
Who's your audience?
Who's your audience? So all of these are different things that you need to start asking yourself internally for your business before you can even start asking those questions of your clients, right? So what we did when we sat down is we asked a bunch. So the very basic one is we started with what is within our current design and dev abilities in our team. And now this started from, I started the business as a freelancer and it was just me. Now it's myself, my husband, we have a full-time developer, we have a designer, we have content writers, right? So our abilities and what we can bring to the table have changed over time. So some of these questions you're going to need to ask yourself on kind of a regular basis, but trying to create that baseline. What's in your abilities? But then beyond your abilities, how much time are you willing to dedicate to learning something new in order to make some cool thing happen, right? So some people are like, I don't care what a client asks me. If they've got the budget, I will do it. I will go out and I will take the e-course, or I will hire a consultant that will teach me how to do that thing, and I will get it done for my client. Other people say, you know, I really have this comfort zone, and this is where I feel best working, and I don't really want to learn new stuff. Or I'm okay with learning when it comes to WooCommerce, but if somebody comes to me and they say, hey, I need this like really specialized form quiz thing that can spit out a matrix of answers, I don't want to learn how to code that. And that's okay, right? So you have to sort of learn, like, how much are you willing to learn? So then that next part is, who do you know? So if you are, whether you're working independently or you're working part of a team, there are indefinitely or very likely going to be things that come up that you just don't know how to do it. Do you know people that do know how to do that? And would they be interested, whether it's for free because they're your friend, or whether you hire them, would they teach you how to do it? Or maybe you don't even want to do it. Who do you know that you can white label their work, or that you can have them do the work and you pay them to do it, right? So that's how you start to break this down and figure those things out. The next question is that one. How do you feel about white labeling? Some people love it, other people not so much, right? But if you say, it's really important to me that under my brand, I can accomplish this thing for my client, but I don't have the skills or I don't have the time, then that might mean that white labeling is the answer. What do you need to be paid? This is something someone said, right? So you need to know what is the time worth, whether it's your time or your skill or someone else that you're hiring, or if you're white labeling, how much do you need to upcharge that to cover you managing it, because that's work too, right? So you have to start asking all of those sorts of questions. And the last one that we have is, what do you not want to do? Like, seriously think about it, because I know all of us, is there anyone here who can't think of one thing that they would refuse to do no matter how much money? So everybody, in theory, there's something that a client would come to you and say, I'll give you a lot of money to do this thing, and you'd still say, sorry, I don't do that, right? Go out, talk to Joe, he does that, or whatever, but I don't do it. So you need to have this sort of main baseline figured out before you can even start to get into really complex or really custom requests. So once you know the answers to all of these questions, then we go to rule number 2, which is not just asking questions of yourself, but being prepared to ask a lot of questions of your clients. So I have spoken to a few, and it tends to be more on the freelance side, but at our WordPress meetup, we have a fair number of people who say, I don't really like doing phone calls with clients. I just like doing email. And I've also had 1 or 2 clients who came to us who said, yeah, we don't do phone calls or video chats or meetings. We just want to do emails. And my general response is, when it comes to really custom stuff, that doesn't work, right? Because it's really hard to understand what someone really wants if all you're getting is email communication. So you have to be prepared to meet or talk on the phone or do something where you can hear their voice explaining the thing, and you can, with your voice, explain. Because even if you write this really long email that's as great as the best documentation in the world, some people just won't get that. Or they'll look at that wall of text and they'll just be like, I can't read this, So you have to be able to talk, and you have to be able to ask a lot of questions. So can anybody throw out, if you're trying to scope out a project, what are the kind of questions that you think are important to ask your clients?
What are the specific objectives of that particular project?
Okay.
What do you need to achieve at the end of it?
Okay, so like what is the main goal that would make you happy at the very end so you'd feel like it was a successful project? Okay? In business terms. So for their business.
Yeah.
And how specific would you get on that?
Well, they can give me specific pointers on we can achieve this, and this for our business at the end of this discussion. That's good enough for me to go away and then be able to scope functionally from that. Think about
So creating an objective, for example, like I need to decrease my bounce rate by 15%. Something like that. Is that what you're talking about? Like a really specific objective?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But more in terms of development.
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand.
Okay, so yeah. So not the marketing, but
specific like
something specific to development. Like I really need to be able to have my shopping cart instantly update and redirect to that page when they click the add to cart button. Right? That's a really basic example, but that's kind of a development kind of thing. What other questions would be important to ask clients if you're trying to scope something out?
I usually just ask open-ended questions.
Okay, like what?
What's your business? What does your typical customer look like? What does that engagement look like? What's the goal?
So what is your business? What does your customer look like? What is the goal? Very open-ended, broad questions.
Usually they've cooked this up in their mind and they've thrown spaghetti against the wall for weeks.
Yep.
A lot of times if you let them just roll for a bit, they'll give you quite a bit.
Okay, so if you let them talk, so if you ask a question and then you do what? Sometimes this is hard for us. You close your mouth and you just listen. I know, like, this is especially hard if we're like if we have a developer mindset and we're like, they start talking and in your head you start going, oh, okay, that plugin can solve that problem. And there's not a plugin for that, but I know that I could probably code this and I would probably require, right in your head you start working out what's the solution while they're still talking. And they've probably gone way on. So that's something I think we have to get into as well, is not just asking the questions, but how do we listen? And making sure to get really broad in the questions. So we talk about, like we were talking about the really, oh yeah, go ahead.
I was going to add to that I usually ask my clients, where do you see your business going? That way I can help you plan now while we're building your website. Let's build it so that we're planning.
Okay, so he said that he asked, where do you see your business going so you can plan for the future? Because that's that scalability piece, right? Making sure that if you know that in 12 months or 24 months they're going to need X, Y, Z out of their website, that you have it set up so that that's a possibility. So what I want to point out and what I think is really important is we always ask why. So we've been getting a lot of what or how or tell me, and that is really great at giving you what the client thinks, which is this is what I need. And we've even had clients who have come to us and said, this is what I need, and here's the plugin I think you should use, right? And we say, okay, why do you think that plugin, first of all? But even step back from that. Why do you think you need this specific feature on your website? What will that do for you or for your audience, right? Because that why is something, they might just say, oh, I don't know, this other person had it and I thought it looked cool. And then, you know, since we do the full marketing, we also get into the whole like, okay, do you know who your target demographic is? And do you know, which not everyone in this room might do. But for us, it's very important to say, just because something looks cool doesn't necessarily mean it belongs on your website. So getting that why is really important. And then it can also help you figure out if you are going in the right direction. So I'm going to give you an example. This is a website that we launched in April. It's for a nonprofit that does a lot of work in Lesotho, which is in the southern part of the African continent. And they came to us and they said, we need an event page, and we're going to have this fundraiser, and there's going to be blocks, and we need like 100 blocks, and sponsors are going to be able to buy the blocks, and artists can create art to kind of go with the block. In my head, you know, we talked to them and we said, okay, you know, that's not a big deal. We'll create something that looks like this, right? Blocks. Super easy, totally makes sense. There's the sponsors, there's the artist displayed. Like, you can say sponsor this block, click on it, something pops up, you can buy that block. So we get into discovery, and this is after the inquiry, and this was one where, you know, we didn't do quite as great maybe as we should have in the pre-proposal, but we're talking more and we're going into it and we're saying, let's really drill down on this, because we think we know what you want, but we want to really make sure. And we got this image from her, which didn't come up in the very beginning. And we're like, she says, oh no, we want the blocks to be like on the island of Manhattan. So that's the island of Manhattan just rotated sideways. I don't know why she has it that way, but she did. And we're like, oh, okay, so this is different, because when she was saying blocks, in her head she was thinking like city blocks. In my head, I'm thinking, like, this is a card view, right? So that's why it's really important to start going, can you, like, explain to me, what does a block mean to you? And, like, what is the block going to do? Like, why would somebody choose to sponsor block 89 over block 72? Like why would they care about specific blocks? And she's like, well, because sponsors would want to put their logo on the block. And I'm like thinking, well, what do you mean? And so then she's like, oh, I have this PowerPoint that has this picture in it that we like have been sending to people. Can I send it to you? I was like, oh yeah. And then I saw this and I went, oh, this is so different, right? So now we're thinking, okay, we have to do something that's a little bit more like this. So then you could say, okay, we're going to build a website where there's an image of the island of Manhattan, and we've gridded it out like this, and you can click on it, and the pop-ups will happen, and all of that sort of stuff. But then we ask that next really important question, which is why? Like, why do a sponsor or an artist, why do they care about that specific one? And she says, well, we really need them to be able to, like, it's going to be specific blocks, like they're going to be inspired by, the artists are going to create art inspired by what's in that specific block. So guess what we can't do anymore? An image. So now we're in the land of we have to do blocks over an actual map. And the reason why we have to do that is because they have to be able to zoom in and say, I sponsored this block right there, and my art is going to have the Central Park Zoo in it because it's in my block, if I'm that artist, right? So they need to be able to zoom in. They need to be able to interact with it in a way that you can't do if it's just a grid over an image. Right? So really asking those questions and drilling down is what got us to this, and realizing we have to do this super complex thing with the Google Maps API and all that kind of stuff, as opposed to the very beginning when I was like, oh, cards, great. This is going to be a cheap website. This will be stuff. Yeah. Right? But if we didn't ask the right questions, we could have priced this at a very different price point than what we ended up pricing it at once we really realized what we're talking about having grids and over a map. We ended up going back to them and saying, we apologize, but we scoped this wrong. And the thing is she also had a very short timeline, so we had built in some buffer anyway, because we normally say, you know, if you want it really fast, like she was like, I want this in a month. And we're like, if you want from nothing, right, in a month, we put in a lot of padding anyway, so we were able to kind of meet halfway. But we went to them and said, now I will share one where I've like lost money, but this one we've gotten a little better now, right? But it's really important to ask questions. We also changed our process after that, because it used to be that my husband, my partner, did all of the initial calls just because it was easier and it made sense, except for we got something like this, and I realized he doesn't have the same, because I develop and he's never developed, and he doesn't have the same like technical, right? So we realized in our own business, we had to change our process as far as how we handled inquiries and proposals to make sure that at least there was some discussion with a developer. There's 2 in our team, myself and our other developer, and that, you know, to make sure we're covering and asking all the right questions, right? I'm sure, has everybody kind of had a learning process like that, where you realize, oh crap, we have to change something to make it work better. So scope, right? Scope is really, really, really important. And you have to ask a ton of questions, as many questions as you can. The more complex a website is, the more you need to spend time on this. And ideally, in the pre-proposal phase, or what we do for some of our bigger ones where we're like, we really cannot accurately scope out the development on this project, is we say, this is the price that you're gonna pay for discovery. It's going to be a separate first project. And then we will give you a price for development. Because we can't, like, without knowing where this is gonna go, we can't price development at this point in time. So that's another way to do that and handle the scope issues. Yeah. That specific client? So no, because we said we didn't scope this right. We need to go back and revisit the budget and what we can do in your time frame. And this is the price, like we gave them the price then. So it wasn't like, oh, it's gonna be a never ending like that. It was like, this was our mistake, but we're gonna meet you, like, because this is probably what we would charge, yeah. Oh, the discovery versus the development?
How do they
I think the thing is that if you're working on, so we wouldn't do that for any work probably that's under like $8,000. So when you're working on like bigger projects that have longer time frames anyway, I think a lot of those clients are used to that, or they understand. They understand that the scope of what they're asking is so large. And then the way we phrase it too is there's 2 ways we can go, which is that we can be very conservative and we can really map out, this is what you're gonna get, but if in Discover it comes up you need X, Y, Z, we're gonna be sending change orders, right? Some people will say, no, I'd rather we just do the discovery for that price and then I get a set price. I mean, there'd be change orders anyway, but they'd have a better feel as opposed to, well, there could be 50 change orders, you know, that sort of thing. So I think a lot of them like that better. And our discovery would mean they're walking away with PSD files. They're walking, right? Like, so they could literally say, yeah, you quoted me on development and it's way too expensive. I'm gonna go over here and have someone else do it. And they'd have all that, they'd have all the market research and they'd have the PSDs and they'd have all of that kind of stuff. So I think that's another thing is explain to them in our discovery, you will get deliverables. It's just you won't get a functioning website, but it's not like you're not getting anything.
Right.
So it's not like just, I know some people do discovery where people pay them to write the proposal basically. Like we do more than a proposal in our discovery if we're doing that. So what happens when you say you've scoped it all out, this is a project you want to take, and it's something really complex. How do you make it happen? There's a couple ways that I see this happening. The really awesome thing is, hey, there are existing plugins, whether they're free or they're premium, that you can use. Maybe it's one plugin, maybe it's a couple that you can patch together and it will make this awesome thing happen, right? And it will feel like this amazing, I gave this really cool thing to the client and the client will love it, and you'll kind of be like, oh, that was kind of easy, right? So that I'm not going to spend too much time talking about. What I'm going to talk about more is what happens when we're in this other land of, okay, maybe there's some plugins that kind of do what you want. So in that scenario, you are either modifying or forking an existing plugin and developing your own, right? Or there is literally nothing. Like, hey, let's put a grid over the island of Manhattan, and they can't be even like an even rectangle because they have to like, you know, right? And people have to buy the squares, right? you are starting from scratch, because what they need is so specialized or so specific or custom to what they are that there's just nothing that exists. So we're going to talk a little bit about what happens when you end up in this land of number 2 and number 3, and how do you handle that. So there's a couple of ways that I feel like that can happen. One is you code it yourself, or if you're an agency, like your in-house team, right? So going back and thinking about what did we ask ourselves in the beginning? What's in our abilities? Is this in our abilities? Maybe it is, and we're just going to code it, and that's fine. Maybe it's not. So then we start to say, okay, what else can we do? Because we want to make this thing happen for our client, and we don't currently have the abilities. So do we spend time learning just on our own doing it? Do we decide that we're going to code it ourselves, but we're going to hire a consultant? This is something that we did recently over the summer. We had a project that was really big and required some really complex API stuff. And I'm definitely not up to it. And our developer, who's way better than me, who's like, you know, I can do this, but there's a few things I have questions about. And we just said, you know, who do we know that's really awesome with this specific API that we could just pay hourly for consulting? And we built that into our project fee. And then we knew that we were going to build most of it, but that person would check our code and just say, hey, this is what you did that maybe could be better, or this is how I would integrate this if you know, Steve, our developer, got stuck, right? So sort of thinking, we're still doing most of the work, but we're getting an outside pair of eyes to help us with the more complex aspect. Just clicker to the What if you don't want to do it yourself? You can hire a freelancer or a white label agency like Codeable. And you can then white label their work, right? So you can hire someone else, they can do all the complex stuff, and then you can make your client really happy, and your client thinks you're super awesome, and they don't even know that you would do it necessarily. Or you tell them, but you know. So that's another option. Or the last one, which is sort of a joke, but not really, is you run really, really far away, right? Because sometimes there are things that are so complex, and you're just like, it doesn't make sense. Maybe it's in that area, like we were talking about. Everyone here basically said, yeah, there's something I can think of in my head I don't do, right? So if you don't do it, then it doesn't always make sense to white label it. Because why, you know, why would you want to do that? Because if you don't want more work like that, there's no point. So that's when you have a few people in your back pocket that you can say, I don't do this, but I think you're great, and this is who you should talk to your client, right? And then you run away and you're like, God, thank God I didn't do that. So, whoa. So I'm going to do a little timeline. This is my time warp. I'm taking you back to 2013. I'm going to do a little, just so you know, because the websites I'm going to show you are circa 2013. And this is a little bit on my progression as well. As I mentioned earlier, I started just freelancing by myself. I had a lot more marketing background, and I started being like, okay, I know HTML and CSS. I could probably configure some WordPress sites for people, right? I set up plugins, activated, maybe did a few little tweaks on some themes. And then I started to figure out, that was in 2010. By 2013, I was like, I'm figuring out PHP. I'm starting to learn it. I was doing a lot of reading. And then I was at the point where I'm like, I'm just going to say yes to everything, right? Because I don't care if I have to learn and I'm like not getting paid a lot, because I just wanted to know more WordPress, right? So somebody came to me and said, I want a calendar on my website. I'm like, I've never done that, but sure, I can do that. And here's a price. You know, I would maybe look at some plugins. I'd say, here's a price, I think. And if I lost money, it was okay, because I learned, and that was my goal, right? So thinking about your goals, too. So this website, the client came to me and said, I want to sell some products and that are just like one-time digital downloads, and I also want to sell memberships where people can have eternal access to print the PDFs of these things. Gosh darn, this was before Woo memberships existed. So what did I do? I went and I said, okay, I can do that. I did a little bit of research. I ended up with WooCommerce subscriptions plus groups, which is a free plugin on the .org repo, and groups for WooCommerce. And then I had to set up a whole bunch of crazy file permissions so that that page on her website they could, if they were logged in, they could download their stuff, but nothing could be directly accessed if they weren't logged in, as far as just going to the actual file URL for where it lived on the server. So that's what I did. It is not pretty. To this day, I'm just like, I can't believe, right? It was super hacked together, but it worked. She was super happy. She still used, I went and looked. We don't do too much for her anymore, but I went and looked, and she still uses that exact same thing, even though at one point I did say, hey, you know, there's other membership site options that might work better for you at this point in time. But she still uses it, and she still likes it, and it still works. So that is an option, right, of taking these other plugins and sort of saying, I'm going to make this work. And if that made the client happy, then that's really, really awesome. But it may also not make the client happy if you, or it might not also make you happy. It's good to have a happy client, but not so much if you spent so much time on it that your effective hourly rate is like $15, right? Has anybody done that? Yeah? Okay, good. Not just me, right? So the next time I got something where it was a complex request, this was a couple months later, the client came to me and said, I have this nonprofit. What I do is I sell products through a WooCommerce store, and 100% of the price of the product, like I don't even take out any sort of wholesale or anything like that, is a donation to build wells and get clean water for people in Africa. People do have to pay shipping, okay? That's not a donation. But the product, she ate the cost of the product with her business and just sold it, and every year would fundraise to build a new well in a new village in Africa. And she said, I really want a donation thermometer so that when people buy my products, I can say what the goal is and I can show people progress towards this goal. I had just maybe a couple months later come off of that crazy subscription plus groups thing, and I went, I love what you do. I want to help you. Let me get back to you with a price. And that was the first time that I ever went to someone and I said, I know that you do, this is someone I knew from my WordPress meetup, and I said, I know you do a lot of work more for other agencies than your own clients, and I know you do awesome code stuff because you lead all of our dev side meetups, and I see you coding away, and I'm just like, right? What would be the price if you were to build this for me? And he gave me a price. I tacked on like a management fee. I went to the client, and she said, yeah, that sounds good. And so we built this little thermometer. It's currently on the website still today. She still uses it. And basically what it is a pretty basic widget that she can drag into any widget areas. This is a widgetized homepage. And she can put in, if she wanted to display a title, it looks like she's not doing it, she can put in the date that she wants to start any of her calculations. So it will ignore any products purchased before that date. And then she can put in what her goal is. And then we ended up, later on, I came back and edited this, like in the next year, when she said, I get a lot of offline donations where people just mail me checks, and I want to show that in my thermometer. So there's this field now that I added in so that she could put in what the check amount was. So that sort of shows you, you know, like, or for me, it was a big example of what I can do when I hire someone else who's frankly better at coding than me. And it turned out to be a great option, and it was a really great gateway project for me, and that was the beginning of me saying, I need other people to work for me, because I realized there are some things that I really like, and one of them that I don't like as much is like spending hours trying to figure out some code thing. So I know this is a developer conference, so don't like throw tomatoes at me, but but my point is, it's okay to not do it all yourself. And as you get on really, really complex projects, like bigger budget projects, frankly, it's kind of close to impossible or really hard to do it all yourself. So that's where you have to start thinking about, even if you don't want to grow an agency or have employees, like who can you have in your wheelhouse that can help you out occasionally or provide some insight or advice or that sort of thing. So today, that's where we are. We, at the beginning of this year, we had worked with freelancers for about 2 years, and at the beginning of this year, we said, we have the volume, and we believe we have the budget. We're going to hire a full-time developer, and it's one of the best things I've ever done. So I think, that's something to keep in mind, because having that extra person allowed us, and frankly, I'll say, I've told people this, is that the quality of what we're putting out now, because I was like, I'm going to hire a developer, and I'm going to hire a developer that's way better than me. So the quality of what we've been putting out has been incredibly better than it was when it was just me. So, yep, so we have a team. So the last rule that I want to get to is underpromise, overachieve, okay? So basically the key to this is that you want to, if you have a really big thing, you want to be really sure about anything you promise to your client that you can 100% deliver on it, right? If you're not sure, then you either do one of those, I think that's an awesome request, let me get back to you, so that you have time to do research. And even if they say, or if it's that, can you just give me like a window for how much this would cost? Don't do it. The answer is, I'm sorry, I need to do a little bit of research and get with my team, and I will get back to you. Because it is so much better to only promise what you can deliver or what price you can really work at instead of giving them false expectations, either way, right? And then to come back and have them be like, wow, you said you're going to do this, and it actually turned out like this, which is even better than I thought it was, and you are so amazing, right? So underpromise, overachieve is really big and really important. And the last example I have for you is kind of falls a little bit under that, but it's also maybe a subset, second rule, which is making sure, as I was saying, you can deliver on what you have promised. So we launched this website last year. It's a WooCommerce store with about 5,000 products in it, all of which have variations on sizes. It's like a spice company, basically. And we launched it. They said, we want to go back to our really basic, inexpensive host, whom I won't name. And we said, okay, it might be sort of problematic, but we did it. Turned out their MySQL version was super out of date, and we had to do all kinds of crazy things just to migrate the database back in. And when we did that, the short of the long story is that the auto increment on the post meta table was removed. So whenever a coupon was created, or he went in and added a product, it totally erased all his post meta on all of his orders, which was like this crazy, it took forever for us to figure out what this was. And we had migrated, because he was like, oh, my website's really slow, I guess I do actually want to host with you. So he migrated back to us, and we're like, why is this site not working? What is it doing? And we're looking at our version that we had on stage, and we're like, it's not doing this. So it happened sometime on his host, and like all this crazy things, right? But our thing is that we migrated it over for him, and we said we would deliver him a working website. And it was so, like, it was beyond me, it was beyond any, like, freelance developers we were working at the time. I ended up being like, I'm going to contact somebody who worked at WooCommerce, and I'm going to be like, I will pay you. Fix this for me, because, and it took forever. We had to open it, because we're like, okay, let's just put it in 2017, right? Make sure it's nothing. No, it was just this crazy thing that happened in the database, right? And we lost money on that, but that is one where I felt good losing money on it, because we had promised a working website, right? And this is someone who had an existing WooCommerce store that came to us for a redesign, right? And he's like, it didn't do this before you touched it. So I think that's the thing, is you have to make sure that you can fulfill on what you promise. So we have about 10 minutes left, and I would be happy to answer any questions. There could also be sort of a choose your own adventure side to this, which could be like, tell us more about hiring people to do work for you, or it could be like, tell me more about one of the projects or anything that you're sort of interested in specifically to giving clients amazing stuff. Yeah.
Your husband used to be on conversations, and you got brought in to do more on development.
Mhm.
Sitting, trying to do Melo graphics in the corner there.
So, no.
frustrating.
What our process is now is my husband still
do it
is the primary initial
during
sales
happy hour as
contact.
well.
Just because I do a lot of our billable work still, and I
update
just
one
don't have
mailer?
time to talk to people that I don't know are serious. Sounds horrible, but that's
Otherwise, I
true.
won't get a chance to do
So
it.
he still does a lot of the initial stuff, but now before he says anything about budget or yes, we can do it or whatever, we have a team meeting. So we have weekly team meetings. We're distributed, but we have them via Zoom. So we like hop in, and that's like just part of our every Monday morning. It's like, hey, what's on the table? What did we talk about? And if something is super tight that it can't wait to, like, let's say he's talking to him on Tuesday and he's like, I really want to get this proposal out to them beforehand, then we just like have a little meeting. He and I also share an office, which some people are like, oh, how can you like sit? But it's so great because I can hear him talking. He's gonna watch this later. And he hangs up the phone and I go, so that thing you just said to them, it doesn't actually work like that, you know? So, but that's the thing, if my husband has a business background and a food background, which is why we do a lot with food companies, because he also makes like recipes and videos and stuff, but he doesn't have a WordPress background. And he is an awesome super user. But you know, so there's things. But we do in our team meetings have our developer talk about it, but for the most part, I'm super comfortable, or if I have a question, I might just ping him on like Basecamp or something and say, hey, this is what I'm thinking is the answer to this, but let me know if you feel differently since you're the one who's actually gonna do most of that work. So. Yeah.
You do have like your consultation meetings, are you recording those notes or having notes of what was said?
So it's like our team meetings or our meetings with clients?
Like, yeah, the expectations and things, client notes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so when it comes to just an initial like sales call, we don't do any actual voice recording of those. So that's mostly on my husband's end as far as typing and stuff. When we do discovery calls, we do them via Zoom, and we use the whiteboard in Zoom, and we will whiteboard it out and we will record a video of the meeting. And that's part of the deliverables to the client. Not like I think any of them actually ever watch them. But, right, because it's something we can reference, and then it's something that if they wanted to, they could look back. And every once in a while, it's useful to say, okay, I know that this is going to be hard for you to hear, but this is what you said. And if they push back, you can say, you said it at minute 32 of this phone call, right? Like, you don't ever want to have to do that, but it's useful if you get in a weird situation where it has to happen.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Everyone loves it when you throw something in their face.
Their discovery phase is deliverables of them are actually usually off of the delivery.
Mm-hmm.
That's not very usual. When specifically I actually talked about our screw failure, we were talking about a scope of work document that we
Yeah.
were implementing. So how do you price it if you're delivering design at the end of it? How do you price that product?
So it does depend. Sometimes we have discovery and design lumped in together, and sometimes we don't. It depends on the project and the budget, honestly. But I think we spend at least an hour to an hour and a half in phone call conversations with clients before we write any proposal. So we have enough of an idea that we know the general scope probably of how much we need to do on design. And we also price our design based upon the number of templates they're going to need. So we can say that to them is that if we're doing an upfront where it's just the discovery and design and you're paying for that, like that, or even in a proposal, like we're gonna say, okay, this design package that you chose gets 4 templates, let's say, right? That's the price. If in your project, and we've had this happen where they say, well, I realize now I have this one page and you just have it as a normal like full width template and it really needs to look really special and cool and stand out. And we say, okay, that needs a custom template probably. So we're just gonna add on like an a la carte like halfway through the project, right? Because a lot of times that happens when we get into like testing and debugging where client testing is happening and they're going through the website and they're like, oh, this looks kind of boring with just my text and some random images put in it. So we do sometimes do that a la carte afterwards, but otherwise we have a set price. Like we know how much a template is going to cost us and we have packages with numbers of templates based upon, right? A WooCommerce store needs a lot more templates designed than a standard brochure site. We have about 4 more minutes. Yeah.
Yeah, last question.
2 minutes.
So we have on our design, we have 2 rounds of revision, and on our development, we have 2 rounds of revision. And what rounds of revisions mean is 1 round is one gigantic list of all the things. So what's really important for us is that they do deliver, like, I went through the entire website, and these are all the things on each page. And if we need to, we do weekly calls with our clients to sort of keep the project on track, we'll go through that list. And then we do all of those changes at once. And then we say, okay, now look at it again, it has all of yours, and they have a chance to do a second round. And that works the same for design as it does for development. It's slightly different if we white label design sometimes for some of our developer friends that don't do design, because then we let them have a round before they show it to their client, and then they get 2 rounds from their client. Yeah. We send a request. We say, this is a request for round 1 revisions, right? And then they respond to it, and there they go. They just sent over their round 1. And if they respond to it, and then like later that same day, they say, oh, my partner or my boss or whatever looked at it, and there's this thing I didn't notice, we'll include that. We're not trying to be jerks about it. But I think it's just really clear, and then it's just making sure that if somebody is starting to go beyond time, that you just communicate with them, and you just say, so we're at 2 rounds of revision, and it seems like you're probably going to have more. This is what we built into our project fee. However, we're happy to do more, and this is how we handle it. Yeah.
So pharma companies are kind of looking at a managed services type model for dev. Is that something you guys have looked into, and what are your thoughts on it?
What do you mean specifically, like outsourcing dev?
No, it's kind of all you can eat.
Okay, so yeah, we do hosting, and our hosting it's like hosting and support packages, and we have small tasks. So you get a certain number of small tasks,
Okay.
and then we have some clients who literally I know I'm going to do work for them every day, and it's as basic as, can you go approve this? Somebody filled out a Gravity form and it created a speaker bio on their website that's now pending, and they don't want to go hit publish and make sure the person's picture isn't sideways or something, right? So we have some clients where we just do that. So we have different pricing based upon how much work they're going to. Is that sort of what you're getting at, like managed dev?
Yeah, that's basically just how you
So
compare the 2 models.
Our packages,
what clients are fit for this and what clients are fit for that.
it's budget mostly, and then also how much support they think they're going to need. And our packages only include small tasks, which are defined as 30 minutes or less. So anything that's like, hey, can you go write a blog post with me? Because we write blog posts. Well, that's not a small task. You need to pay for blog writing, right? Or I really want to change the whole header of this 1-page template. It might be a small task, or it may not be a small task because it might take more than 30 minutes for us to do it local, pull down, do it locally, make sure it looks good, and then push it up to live. So then that would then be hourly. I think I have time for one more question. Yeah. So we have a designer who currently is doing a lot more of our ongoing graphics work and logo design, because we occasionally do that, not too often, or packaging design for some of our, if we get a new food client that's I need better packaging than what I just have been selling at the farmer's market, that sort of thing. Right now, I'm doing a lot of our web design, and that is hopefully going away soon. So we're looking at probably hiring another designer in order to do that, just because there's a point when you realize that you're either there's a podcast that Brian Clark does, and Seth Godin was on it just last week, and he was talking about the difference between a freelancer and an entrepreneur. And the freelancer is somebody who does all the work, and an entrepreneur is someone who kind of manages it and oversees it. And I'm kind of getting to the point where I'm like, I don't really want to do the work anymore, right? I want to do the big picture stuff. So that's it. I'm happy to talk to you afterwards. You can also get me at amber@roadwarriorcreative.com, or you can tweet at me. That's our business and my personal. So thank you so much.